Welcome to day 2 of the Seeing Jesus Challenge. Our reading today had to do with Simon, who was brought to Jesus by his brother Andrew. And Jesus said, "You're not going to be Simon anymore. You're going to be Peter. You're not going to be a little pebble. You're going to be a rock." And it was an indication of the journey that Peter was about to enter on, from where he was in that moment to ultimately where Jesus wanted him to be. And it's the same journey all of us are on as well. I think if we could look at Peter just from a leadership perspective, we'd say Peter was pretty much a natural born leader. He was bold, he was daring, men responded to him. He apparently could speak well when he wanted to, and he certainly as a Christian had the ability to put great faith in Jesus, faith that others sometimes didn't demonstrate. If he lived today, we'd say he was a type A personality. But I think that type A personality created some crisis for Peter when it came to living for Jesus, and I think it does for many people today who have that personality. I think one of the things he struggled with was letting Jesus be in control. He knew he was supposed to live by faith. He knew he was supposed to trust Jesus, and sometimes he could do that, like when he asked Jesus for permission to get out and walk on the water with him, and Jesus told him he could, and he jumped out of the boat and started walking on water. That was great faith. But then he would struggle with maintaining that faith and letting Jesus be in control. And he would sometimes want to do it himself in his own power and his own abilities and his own understandings. That's why he took his eyes off of Jesus and started looking at the storm. And when he did, he began to sink. And so I think Peter wanted to live by faith, but a lot of times he trusted in himself and his own abilities and his own skills and his own talents and his own understandings. And I think the second place that Peter struggled with was learning to think before he spoke, or learning to think before he acted. Many times he was very brash and rash in what he did, and he would come to regret those things because he stepped out away from what God wanted him to do and into the realm of his own knowledge and understanding. And so Jesus was always trying to get him to come back and think and trust in him rather than his own abilities. And I think the greatest example of that is found in Matthew in the gospel where Jesus is talking to his disciples and he's asking them the question, "Who do you say that I am?" And they're giving him different answers. And then Jesus looks at Peter and says, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter says to him that great statement of faith, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus says, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And upon this kind of faith, I'm going to build my church." And man, it was a great moment for Peter. You could see him. There was pride there. He had gotten the answer right. He had shown faith in Jesus, and I think probably at that point, he was feeling pretty good about himself. And then just a few verses down from that, Jesus starts talking about going to Jerusalem, and he makes it very clear that when he goes to Jerusalem, he's going to die. And Peter steps up and says, "Not going to happen. We're not going to Jerusalem. I'm not letting you. You're not going to die." And Jesus says to him, "Get thee behind me, Satan." So in just a matter of a few verses, he goes from "Blessed are you" to "Get thee behind me, Satan." And it was a picture of that journey. Peter had great potential, but he wasn't quite there yet, and he was in the process of learning and growing and developing. Peter spent nearly every day for 3 years with Jesus. But even when Jesus left and ascended back up into heaven, Peter still had some lessons to learn. He still had some areas to grow in his life. And I think that's an encouragement for us today. We're all works in progress. We're all going from where God wants us to be, from where we are to where God wants us to be eventually. And God is moving us little bits at a time there. And so here's my encouragement for you today. Let God just work in your life in the small, simple things he wants to do today. And be content to take a little step and a little step and a little step until finally you arrive at the place where God wants you to be. Have a great day in Jesus Christ.